in. Chuck Wilder here with my guest, Kimberly Dvorak. She is the Foreign Senior Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy. And remember that website, thekdreport.com. You know, $64 billion. I think that's the figure you said that we sent.
67, yeah. 2 billion among friends.
Yeah, and here we worry about, you know, the Social Security being drained, huh?
Yeah. Well, these are actually, Saudi Arabia does actually purchase the weapons, but I think that, you know, maybe the viewers need a little bit of a refresher course. Back in 2014 and 15, we covered on your program, the Ring of Fire, is the U.S. preparing for war with Iran. And ever since, and it started under the Obama administration, continues under the Trump administration, the, you know, FMS programs, foreign military sales, as well as the line of credit they provide for a lot of people who default on their loans. Israel's one of those people that defaults on loans with the U.S. We've been arming all of these things, and the Ring of Fire, it shows all of the countries around Iran, and we have armed all of these states, or I say dictator states, that they're buying all of these weapons. We're arming them, and they still couldn't detect this attack. And, you know, they have been, the U.S. has been selling Saudi Arabia, as I said before the break, the U.S., you know, the Patriot defense missile. They didn't use that. It didn't get out. They have the bunker buster bombs. I'm not certain what Saudi Arabia needs with this bunker buster bombs, but they do have those. They have the area refuelers. They have a plethora, and by far they're the #1 customer of the United States when it comes to arms. Now, if they have all of this technology, presumably, either the U.S. is going to be extremely susceptible to an attack on the homeland, or much more likely, this shows how the Saudi Arabians are completely inept at running any kind of military campaign, as they can't even beat Yemen. And that's a very sad thing, because that's, you know, a man-made war that should end, and the U.S. should be moving to end that immediately. But we aren't. We're on the record saying that we will be supporting Saudi Arabia because they were hit from Iran and Iraq, which is completely not true, and no other big countries are coming out and stating this yet. The administration continues to move forward with Mr. Mike Pompeo at the State Department leading the way on the Sunday show, saying that this is totally Iran, they're going to do this, they're going to pay for it, and if Iran indeed attacked, even through proxy, the KSA, is that really amount to war for the United States to step in? They're not a NATO country. It's not one for all for one with Saudi Arabia. And it's kind of like, you know, saying that, you know, back at the Vietnam War, blaming Russia for the North attacking the South, and they needed to step in because, you know, you had that you know, fight. I mean, it's and it's ludicrous to even say that. I don't think we'd ever blame Russia for that type of thing. So why are they blaming the United States, and why do we have to pick up the water, send more troops, and escalate the situation, which is completely a tinderbox right now?
Well, the lock and loaded comment, you can take it a bunch of different ways. If you are on Trump's side, you just say, we're just letting you know that we're lock and loaded. We're not just, you know, sitting here with empty weapons or whatever. You know, the Iran's President Rouhani said that he will not negotiate with the United States, and he's in sanctions in your report. And are they going to actually speak one-on-one at the United Nations? Is that any possibility?
Yeah, you know what? I think actually over the weekend, and failing to get any kind of support from any of our allies, the president is now looking at talking to Rouhani, and they will, you know, sit down and say, look, this is really ludicrous. We're escalating the situation. The sanctions are nearly crippling the people in Iran, and unfortunately the people that are in power, they continue to have their fancy homes and eat whatever they want, but it's the people that always take the brunt on these sanctions. So it looks like the president is at least rallying, trying to push back some of the warmongering from his own staff, and these are people giving him advice, and the Pentagon saying we need to, you know, retaliate. I'm not certain that, you know, Saudi Arabia is a nation state like Puerto Rico is to America. So I don't know where they come up with this retaliation, and it's our fault. And there have already been a few attacks this summer, in fact, by the Houthis that were claimed, the administration claimed that something happened. It wasn't, false flags were declared, like it wasn't the U.S. This was people trying to, push the situation in the Middle East into a much broader war. And so you really have to stop, and at least Trump is slowing down, says he'll meet with Rouhani. We'll see if that meeting takes place in New York at the UN, and we'll see what discussion really are, because all the evidence that I've been collecting points that this was really an attack from the Houthis. And, the United States could figure out what happened in a heartbeat, because we have telemetry, which is satellites above, that we could go back and pull 2 days before the attack and 2 days after the attack. And we could see where these missiles were coming from, these drones. So we're not doing that. The U.S. isn't, putting those out there. So it presumably means that they're trying to get their story together and their facts together in an effort, again, to push us into war.
It's like the picture, when I get it in my mind whenever I listen to the way they describe it, knowing who did it.
Yeah.
Kimberly, is that, and in my mind, it's like, you got an oil tank, 360 degrees. Yeah. And you look and see which side of the tank, what direction was it hit. And I don't think the drones went over.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
No.
Hit the other side. That'd be pretty smart, I guess, on their part.
Yeah. It could possibly happen, but these missiles, let me just tell you, have the earmarks of the Herpy missiles that were originally made in Israel, and the technology was sold to China, and China turned around and sold these to Iran. These are not precision weapons. Precision weapons actually hit their target. The fact that a number of these munitions flew into Saudi Arabia and failed to hit their target means that the people who actually launched these attacks didn't have the experience to hit their targets. So I think that's also a big thing to look at. And people don't want to talk about what some of these were sent in by a drone. But when you look at the capabilities the United States, again, has provided for Saudi Arabia, they did nothing. And they didn't necessarily lose a lot of oil. They were expecting oil to go to $100 a barrel again. It hovered right back down where it was. So you're not even looking at a country here. We're trying to, grow this problem. And again, I mean, the Iranians, obviously, again, the leadership in Iran, not good people, but also the fact that the United States has systematically been arming everyone surrounding Iran. Iran has to feel threatened.
And speaking of precision, wasn't it called the mother of all bombs when Trump launched that site? Yeah. I think it hit the front door, didn't it? Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and we've actually sent these, given these countries bunker buster, which means if they really wanted to strike Iran, it would go down presumably into their, nuclear facility programs. But right now the administration appears to be headed towards the cyber war side of things and trying to hit at Saudi Arabia through the cyber to kind of, take away some of their power. And they've also said that they do have the technology, if there is war that can break out, that however they do this, of course they didn't disclose exactly what they use, but they could shut down the power grid in Iran today. So dreams that Iran's going to be sending missiles to the United States someday, if we have the technology to shut down their power grid, that happens in a nanosecond, and that completely negates whatever they're building underground.
And Iran's president and others, they always have this macho approach when they're talking to their citizens. Yeah. Oh, we shot down the drone. Look, here's all the pieces. Death to America. Death to America. Obama. Oh, thank you for the billions of dollars. Death to America. Hey, give us another billion. Death to America. We'll never pay for hostages. Oh, we just paid for 6 of them, according to, they're always shooting their mouth off. And one of these days, it's going to get them in trouble. I don't know how serious they are. I know that, we're the big Satan and Israel's the little Satan. I guess that's if I got them in the right order. And, the way I don't know why anyone would talk to them. And I think maybe just my kind of, thing here is that, they've met a different commander-in-chief, that they don't realize that, this guy's not going to mess around with you. So you can go ahead and and say, death to America or death to Trump or whatever you want to holler.
Yeah.
Because you better be careful because he usually does have his facts, I think, before he shoots off. He may shoot off at Twitter.
He does.
He gets his
and then he
facts,
comes
before
back, yeah. And then,
on those two.
yeah, and then rational thoughts come back in, and he actually starts talking to other people outside his own administration. Because again, the administration, the people that he has hired to work in NSC and DNI and CIA and State Department, they're not actually out there promoting the president's policies. The president said he was not going to be a wartime president. He fired General McMaster, over that very issue. So he gets it, and he has that gut instinct again. But when he hires people that are the antithesis of what his program is, you got to question, like, what are you thinking? And in the case of Iran, I mean, they're not going to attack us. So I think, in essence, who we're protecting in this is Israel. And we're under a bit of a shift in the Middle East right now. And again, I go back to that ring of fire. The big shift always goes back to, in the region, the Sunni versus the Shia. And Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, all of the bad actors, they're all Sunnis. So, and, ironically, Israel actually sides with the Sunnis as well. So I think what we're looking at is we want to see a shift in who runs that region, moved from the Shias to the Sunnis. So they want to get rid of Iran as the major, playmaker in the region. Saudi Arabia is looking at this. I would not even be surprised that if MBS is actually behind some of the maneuvering on this, because it plays into their favor if the United States gets involved and tries to protect countries that are really not that good at countries, and they're pretty bad actors.
All right, let me throw this one at you. She's used to it. Okay. Is there going to be anything popping up from the Dems? Russia was behind Iran bombing Saudi Arabia. They're the ones that put them up to it.
Yeah, that's right.
That's stretching that far.
No.
I mean, we got rid of Bolton. Okay. So he does try to do the right thing.
In the end,
is Russia ever going to play a part in any of this at all?
No, Russia's not going to get involved in this, and they're happy to look back and laugh about what's going on.
Got enough oil.
Yeah.
Right. I understand they're doing pretty good.
Yeah, and Russia primarily looks at Iran as an energy provider for them, so they would like to get some of that energy out of Iran. But the Russians are just kind of sitting back. We haven't heard too much from them, and they're kind of letting the U.S. government, do whatever it is the U.S. government does when it comes to war. Because when we're participating, when we're paying taxpayer dollars to extend these wars in the Middle East, which we've been there for 18, 19 years, and we still haven't won, they're laughing because we're going bankrupt. And that means in the end that we will be a weaker country. And the president said, we're not going to be the policeman of the world. Well, the first 3 years under his administration, we are still the policemen of the world. We should have let this go, not worry about it, said, hey, that's KSA's problem, that's Iran's problem. They didn't hit any U.S. targets, has nothing to do with us. We don't need their oil anymore. But the powers that be are trying to push this administration and goat him into a war, because here's where the Democrats come in. Then they can say the president has taken America into an illegal war, and they'll go after him that way.
Oh boy, how many illegal wars have we had when you consider how many times we've attacked without any congressional approval?
Yeah, and they're cowards. The Congress, they're cowards because they could take that War Powers Act in a heartbeat. They refuse to do it because they don't want to be held accountable one way or the other.
Now here's kind of way off the subject here, but I wanted to ask you because you are a California girl. And I just saw a brief little thing, and I said, boy, this almost looks like some fake news. And it sounds like serious news and good news. But I saw a report, and I think it came from the New American, which is very reliable.
Yeah.
That Trump or somebody has told the Chinese that they must sell the port of Long Beach.
Yeah.
Because they can no longer have any control of it. And this whole road to Silk or whatever it's called?
Silk Road, yeah.
I can't remember.
Silk Road.
I'm sorry?
Silk Road.
Silk Road, yeah, the Silk. Well, I was halfway right. Or, no, I was backwards.
Dyslexic.
The Silk Road, yes. because they're very, very smart. They go and say, oh, we're going to build this up for you. And all of a sudden, well, oh, you can't pay the bill. We'll just have to stay here for a while or whatever. But that's some serious stuff. And actually, the port is like, Costco or something like that. Or it sounds like Costco, like you got Sam's and Costco.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But I figured you might know because you're on the top of everything.
Yeah, well, what's happening with the Long Beach, that is thrown out of left field for me. In Long Beach, what's been slowly happening over the last several years is that the Chinese are working really diligently to build another Panama Canal-like entry, and so they want to put Long Beach out of business by avoiding America altogether and move their goods through Nicaragua, which will have a Panama-like canal type of thing. And then also a lot of the Chinese stuff right now, especially where the fentanyl is concerned with the drug epidemic, that's all going down to Ensenada and ports in Mexico, and they're offloading there. So the second they offload goods in Long Beach, they have to pay tariffs. They got to pay for the shipment that's coming in. They go south of the border, they pay nothing. Yeah.
I knew you would have the answer. Kimberly Dvorak, we're going to take that final break. Senior Foreign Policy Advisor for the Committee for Responsible Foreign Policy and also Long Beach policy. She knows all this stuff. Yes. It's streaming live at Periscope.com, Facebook, and you'll get the YouTube report a little bit later on, and her website, the KD Report, spell the last name Dvorak. Earlier, these Houthis, they're pretty busy, right? Because you mentioned they attacked Saudi Arabia pipelines and other oil infrastructures, and that was in May.
Yep.
Then they struck the airport in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
That was in June.
Yeah.
So
they're capable
they don't take too long.
No, they're capable of doing this, but I mean, you have to again look at the precision. We saw way too many of these munitions drop down before they hit their target, so they clearly don't have the capabilities to actually operate a lot of these weapons of war that they have. I will say this: that the Saudis, the Shia Saudis who are fighting, are on the they're in their death spiral. There's not a lot left. Now, the Iranians did send 23 people to Yemen. Again, this is allegedly, so we presume this is how they transferred some of these weapons. However, the easiest solution here will rest with Saudi Arabia. If MBS wants to redeem himself and not look like he's been losing all these wars in Yemen, which he has, what they should do is call for a safe zone or a DMZ zone that's on the border with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. And they could, make this kind of a ceasefire area, and then the Yemenis could actually live presumably peacefully there. It would end all of the hunger and starvation of the Yemen war. So you look at something like that where you kind of look at it could be protected by like a Sinai Peninsula type guards, where everybody it's a ceasefire in essence. We're going to let them do their thing, but the Houthis really want and do have claim to some of Yemen. So experts that I've talked to on this have said that the easiest way to do this is just build a little safe zone and allow the Houthis to live and do whatever it is that they're going to do, as long as they commence a ceasefire and promise not to attack the Saudi Arabians in the future. Something like that could work. Something like that doesn't require bullets and bombs, and that's something that most Americans probably agree with. But this administration, again, has been operating on the president doing one thing, which is fine, and what he's pushing is fine. But then it goes back to his cabinet members and they just let it go, and they don't do it. They're like, I don't listen to the old man. He knows nothing.
Yeah, really. Which reminds me, I wrote this down when you first mentioned it, and I said if I get a chance, and we got about a minute left here for you. But whenever you were talking about the FMS, the military sales, what was the upstanding for? Foreign
military sales.
Foreign military sales. Can the president do that on his own, or does he have to rely on both houses, or how does that work?
Well, I mean, in peacetime, the president has to go to the Congress, and it's actually in statutory law where the military sales need to go to Congress to be approved, and if they're not approved, then they come back. But let's keep in mind, like less than 5% of these deals get not approved. So pretty much everything goes through. The president, claiming national security, saying this is in our national security interest, we're selling them this. So he has the ability to say yes, and he has the ability to say no when it comes to national security.
Yeah, kind of like when President Clinton, remember when he bombed the
Aspirin factory?
aspirin? Yeah, but the same day that Monica Lewinsky was testifying.
Yeah.
But hey, it was not a diversion, all right? The president was protecting us. Okay.
Yeah.
Kimberly, excellent report as
Thank
usual. And want everybody to go to thekdreport.com. Kimberly Dvorak, Dvorak.